Hey guys, I'm Doug,
I'm Chris.
and we're back to talk about running. Today, I'm going to ask Chris a lot of questions about why I suck at running and what good running should look like. And luckily, we have an expert to demonstrate instead of me strapping on ranger panties and like clunking around like a lame duck.
We're going to get into gait is what you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, I
correct?
want to know, what are the phases of the running cycle, right? Like, I know people are like, well, you need to be like forefoot strike or midfoot. And like, what the fuck? What is it supposed to look like? What's the right terminology? And what's going on as I'm, spinning my feet fruitlessly?
Well, let me tell you, scientists can't really agree on anything. So I'm going to give you best practice again, which most people hate to hear, but just fucking deal with it. Running gait is broken down into two phases primarily. The two overall headlines, and there's a couple sub-phases within all that. So you're going to have your stance phase, and then you're going to have your swing phase. So your stance phase is the most important. It's when your foot is actually coming in contact with the ground, and which is most important for form, and basically where all the impact happens. So if you're inefficient, then you have a higher risk of injury, versus a swing phase when your leg's up in the air. So for your stance phase, it's going to be initial contact. So when your foot hits the ground. Now, there is going to be a lot of debate, like I mentioned, forefoot striker versus heel striker versus midfoot striker. Most experts agree that midfoot striking is the best because you want to have your foot land under your body when you hit the ground, because that is where all your power is going to come from. You're not fighting your own physiology. So when you land, you want to have midfoot striking kind of be in line, and you want to have your shin more or less perpendicular to the ground when you land. So once you have your midfoot strike against the ground, then you have your mid stance after that, which is your foot flattening phase. So you're going to land, foot is basically going to flatten against the ground, and then you have propulsion phase, which is your push off, which goes from heel to toe. It might be pronounced more for people who have our heel strikers versus forefoot strikers, but it just depends. That's how the three phases within your landing phase work. And then you're going to be in the swing stage, which is when you pull off. When you are coming off the ground, what your leg is doing when it's not on the ground. So
You're pulling your heel up or whatever?
Pretty much.
Okay. Does the actual mechanics of my foot make a difference for like the flattening phase? Is this where like flat feet versus high arches comes into play?
100%. So flat feet people, I'm sorry to tell you, you have a higher risk of developing shin splints, which a lot of people probably have, but doesn't necessarily mean you are going to have shin splints. You have a higher risk of it. We talked about shoes and kind of finding what works out best for you. So if you have shoes that help kind of fight that overpronation of the flat feet,
those are the control shoes.
100%,
Okay.
which should be more helpful.
Okay.
High arch people have less of a risk of that. People with bow legs have more of a risk of developing shin splints because of that as well. Because I'm a pronator, you said you're a supinator.
Yep.
So it just depends. Having the proper footwear is really important. But for this, it's just how your foot lands and how you can do it most efficiently. And those are the two phases of the gait. So that's what you're going to be doing, spend most of your time when you're running. So
I think that most people who get into running want to know.
weirdos, what you're saying?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think it starts as people that want to get the most bang for their buck. Where it's
Sure.
like running is low cost and you can set the bar for the volume of training on your own. But what we find is that like you want to get better at running and like you get a different watch and then you get different shoes, like 5 pairs. And then you're registering for races that are not inexpensive. And
Nope.
I think all hobbies, especially first world hobbies, can get pretty expensive.
For sure. You're a running nerd, it sounds like. A little bit, yeah. You got multiple pairs, you got all the stuff.
I
all
like
the gear.
things where I'm not good at them.
Okay.
So I can humiliate myself on an effort by effort basis.
It's okay. I got my ass kicked too with it, so it's not a big deal.
But I definitely know that like cool guy shit is important to me. I've always been a geardo. So
Okay.
like when it comes to running watches, there's some metrics that are, at the end of every run. Like
Sure.
whether it's your Apple Watch or a Garmin or a Suunto, they're telling me some things that I have a really hard time understanding what the significance of them is.
Yep. Your watch is much fancier than mine. Mine just tells me how far I've gone and how much time.
What kind of a poor person are you?
I am saving all of my officer money.
I know when I go online, I see people saying that there's like an ideal tempo, but it's an argument
Right.
amongst runners.
Uh-huh.
It seems like a higher tempo is better.
Definitely. So I think the number that people have settled on at this point has been 90 strides per minute with counting one leg. So 180 between both legs.
Okay. That feels pretty quick.
It
Like
does.
180, I'm getting better at running now as I'm losing weight, and I think I'm really more in like a 165 range.
Okay.
And I know I feel better when I pick it up, but I don't have the ability to maintain that higher tempo for a longer period. It just feels like, it's like, oh man, I'm like really burning out here.
Yeah. Keep it in that range, see what works for you over the time, but that's kind of a good general guideline of how many strides per minute you're going to be hitting. Keeping that cadence and not overstriding where you're going to get more fatigue. It might feel tougher to kind of have that upped cadence, but it's not going to be as tough as when you overstride and kind of fight your body. Then you get more fatigued. If you're overstriding, your heel is going to strike. You're going against your own physiology. You're not being most efficient. Like I said, you want to land underneath your body, and if you're overstriding, you're fighting that, and you're fucking yourself up.
So like with a heart rate monitor strap and a watch,
you are geared up. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It tells me what my stride length is.
Sure.
And it tells me what my vertical oscillation is, which we'll talk about as well. But is there a way for me to measure my ideal stride length?
It's kind of a trial and error thing too, because you know what feels best for your body when you're fighting your body. You know if it feels off, if it feels awkward. I hate to use this. Most people say, hey, if you go run barefoot, how do you run? And that actually is kind of a good pilot test to see where your body kind of goes when you're just running with no shoes on the grass, and you kind of see what works best for you. But you'll know if you're going outside of your own physiology to run. If you have a shorter stride length, most distance runners actually have a kind of a clipped stride. You watch any of the marathons, you watch any people in the Olympics and the 10K, 5K runners, their strides aren't super long. They are very efficient runners, but most of the time it's kind of a clipped stride.
That efficiency happens during the swing phase, right?
And you got it. Look at you, huh?
See, I'm learning every day. And that efficiency is also measured in vertical oscillation,
right?
Which when you see that number, it's like, what does that mean to me? It's 0.054. I mean, what does that mean?
All right. So I am not as much of a geardo as you. I'm more of a...
That's why he's good at this, and I'm not.
I rely more on just sensory feedback from your own body. But with the vertical oscillation thing is people bounce a lot, and that's just wasted energy for the most part. You want to think of your lower half as more of wheels versus like a pogo stick, just bouncing up and down. Each step you're taking, running is more of a series of individual jumps, but you don't want to be spending any of your extra energy going up. You want to spend going forward. So the less vertical oscillation you have to a certain point, the better, because you're spending that extra energy on going forward versus up. So
I guess it's likely one reason that trail running is so much more difficult, not so much about elevation changes as much as it is that avoiding rocks and roots and stuff increases your vertical oscillation pretty dramatically.
100%. And then also just the psychological toll that it takes on having to constantly be on alert versus I'm on a treadmill or I'm on the road. I can just zone out and just go.
Yeah, so. Right on. Okay. The imbalance.
The imbalance aspect is kind of an advanced metric, but basically it's seeing how you land, how quickly you land on each side, and how hard you're landing on each side. So if you're putting much more force on one side versus the other, it might be due to a muscle imbalance. It might be because you have a small injury on one side and you kind of compensating on the other side. So it just depends. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong, but it's a good way to kind of see where your body's at and if you favor one side over the other. And the more you run, the more those issues might kind of be exacerbated. So if you have access to a PT or someone like that who can kind of iron those issues out, then that'd be beneficial.
If it's a 50-50 balance on those things is what they try to do. Do you have any idea of like when people should start to pay attention to what the imbalance is? Because body's not even. So like if it's a 49-51% balance, that seems pretty close to balance to me.
You know? I don't want to give any medical advice, but I think that there's...
You're not a doctor?
I'm not a doctor. I'm sorry. I wish I was. I would make a lot more money.
If I met a doctor who sounded like you,
I wouldn't trust him either. Yeah,
I would go down the street to a different doctor.
100%. So I don't want to give a specific range on which you should go see somebody, but if it's within a couple points of being 50-50, you're probably pretty good. But I would ask a physical therapist if you have access to that, or...
It's probably just a good indicator that you're going to start to feel some overuse in one side or the other based on that. Knowing what those numbers are, if other people who are geardos have those watches, and kind of watching that is going to help. But I guess the really important part is, what's the right way to run? You know what I mean? Like, what am I doing when I zone out? What am I doing with my fucking hands? Am I supposed to lean forward? Am I supposed to be vertical and like feel it in my hips?
Yep.
Like, what is the right way to do this?
If you're like me, you kind of remember the worst part of different things that happen. So if you get at the end of your run, you're pretty much fucked up. You're tired. Your muscles are fatigued. You're mentally exhausted. It can be a very traumatic experience. So that's what you're gonna remember. But that's also the most important time to kind of keep your form together. When you're most fatigued is the highest risk of injury. So if you can maintain good form and proper technique when that's happening, that will kind of reduce your risk of getting hurt at the time when it's most crucial. Running tall is the first thing I want to touch on. So running tall is thinking you have kind of like what do you call 'em? A marionette. The
You have a string tied to your head, right?
tied to your head. So someone's pulling you up. Because what I see when people get tied, especially when I was running PT tests with my soldiers, I'm an officer, so I'm sorry that people
I'll have you make a PowerPoint about this later.
talk about MedTC. When people start getting tired, they hunch over. I see it all the time. It's one of the main things I see with people doing PT tests or just in general running. When they get tired, they hunch over, and then you're fucked. You're gonna go against the proper technique when that starts happening.
Why is that setting people up for failure? Why is hunching over? What is it disabling?
Everything. So you're basically, when you're hunched over, you're not doing anything right. So you're not engaging the things that are going to help you the most. So we talked about the glute activation with using your ass is going to be the power. It's going to be the engine behind where all your power comes from. You are leaning down, so all of a sudden you're going to shuffle more. You're not going to have anything moving in the correct way that it's supposed to, that is most efficient for running. Think about if you hunch over. Can you move your legs the same range of motion as you can when you're standing tall? No.
A lot more input and a lot less output.
100%. Thank you for,
Yeah. You're good.
You translate well with this, so it's good.
I'm used to interpreting officers.
It's okay. I got you. I'll need your help when I can do some land nav, so I appreciate you. So
We'll just be lost together.
That's
We'll
fine.
call it area familiarization.
I like it. You don't want to be hunched over, but I want to talk about leaning forward.
Okay.
Because you are going to be propelling yourself in a linear direction, right? You're going forward. There really is no lateral movement within the motion of running. So if you're going forward, you know where you're going. You want to lean a little bit forward. I'm not talking lean all the way forward, but if you lean a little bit, you're actually helping and assisting your body move in the right direction.
Well, you're keeping your body in a straight line, but you're leaning forward enough that it almost feels like you're going to fall over, right? And then you're running.
Right to that point. You don't want to go over that point, but it's still helping. So you're not
hip hinging. You're just kind of.
Exactly.
Yep.
See?
All right.
You know all your shit. It's good. You don't even need me. And then building off that, so with the hands, that's another big thing I see with people get tired is they get real fucking tense. You're a pretty jacked guy, right? You get the high PRs.
Nothing makes me happier than when someone snaps a photo of me running when I am gassed and I look like just a veiny, triumphant bastard. And I'm like, oh, yeah, but it's actually bad then, huh?
Muscling through running doesn't work. I'm sorry to tell you. I've done it a million times, and I know that no matter how hard I strain, how hard I try, it's not going to work for you. Keeping loose, and especially the first thing you can think of keeping loose and trying to keep loose and actually affects the rest of your upper body is your hands. I think of it as having a potato chip in each hand, and you don't want to crush it. Because I see people just, if you tense your fist, you clench up your fist, the rest of your body kind of follows that. So if you keep them loose, you really don't have any other choice but to keep the rest of your upper body loose. And that's really important for not wasting any extra energy when you're already fatigued.
Okay, so when I see the guy on the treadmill, and he's like, got his big headphones on, he's like singing and like praise music, hands up and stuff, like that's good for him.
He knows what's up. It's fun. Maybe don't do that, but maybe just speed loose, which is great. Well, think about.
He seems happy, man.
If anybody out there is an MMA or a boxing or a combat sport enthusiast, I don't know if you are, but
I mean, I watch it on TV, but I'm far too delicate for that.
Sure. But if you're throwing punches, you don't want to be tense and throwing punches, then you're gonna gas quickly. Versus if you basically stay loose until the last second when you tense up your fist and hit, that is much more efficient and much less of a waste of energy. So it's kind of the same deal. You don't want to be super tense because then your body just is going to fatigue quicker. It's also, again, don't get fucking discouraged. Like, I get it that everybody wants to be fantastic at running from the get-go. It is something we can naturally do, but you're not going to go out there breaking records from the first day.
If you guys enjoyed this content and you want to see more of it, then ring the bell and subscribe to our channel and follow us at SOFLETE.com.